Hello. I'm doing this video now concerning many of the conflicts that have been going on amongst the non-Jews who are involved in Torah. One group is the Noahide camp. The other group is the I Get Ger camp. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to call them, but they don't. But what's happening is the conflicts have been going on for some years. And it seems to be ramping up each time it happens. Oftentimes, these conflicts occur around the high holidays. This one occurred, kind of blew up. The current one blew up around the Sukkot. And what happens is there's different dynamics that are happening. The two major dynamics would be the Torah issues that people are discussing. But what seems to be more of a dynamic is the personality conflicts. People wind up attacking each other on a personal level. And this also is something that ramps up. It's been ramping up over the years and seems to ramp up especially during the high holidays. During these past high holidays, especially during the time of Sukkot, there became a new flare-up in this conflict. One of the rabbis is apparently, for a period of time, has been collecting a list of complaints against one of the other rabbis. Everything from questioning his interactions with Muslims, how a person's supposed to do work with non-Jews and not interact with various groups, I'm not sure, but interacting with the Muslims, complaining that he has a Hebrew name that he uses instead of his birth certificate name. And just a variety of similar list of arguments. And likewise, people are attacking the other person, the other rabbi. Much of the attack that goes on seems to be over personality issues and the fighting back and forth that occur in this realm. And it's somewhat amongst the rabbis. It's also amongst the followers of these different groups. And the followers tend to get more vicious than the rabbis themselves. So my concern in all this is that we wind up attacking each other on personal levels. Now, as a gentleman, David, who lives in England, often mentions in these discussions that go on, he gets in the middle of it too, but he often mentions that you don't know me. You don't know who I am. You don't know the real me. All you know is this thing on the internet where we're making this discussion. And what happens is people will wind up attacking the person rather than discussing the idea. This is a phenomenon that happens on the internet because we really don't meet each other. We don't interact on a personal level. All we do is interact on the internet, which is a very impersonal mode of communication. Particularly in social media, where everything is these little blurbs. They're little statements that go back and forth, and social media is designed to increase activity, and that oftentimes means increasing their analogs in that increase conflict. That's how they get people to engage in social media. So the people that work out the analogs figure out ways to get people to fight with each other. So we're getting into this mix, and we kind of throw the laws of Lashon Hara out the window because, well, we have to defend things. We have to speak truth to power, and we wind up attacking the power. And we see Lashon Hara all over the internet, and all of us wind up engaging in it. It's something we have to look at ourselves and say, what are we doing? So in these conflicts, I mean, if the gentleman in England is right, if we meet each other, we sit down at a cafe and have coffee together and we chit-chat, maybe that would actually help somewhat. And we actually see each other as human beings. If we see each other as human beings, we may not be fighting, throwing rocks at each other so quickly. Now, in all these conflicts, I mean, on the internet, all the rabbis drive me crazy. All of them. They all drive me nuts. and all the people with politicians, everyone drives me nuts because what's presented on the internet is designed for conflict. So I've had the opportunity in all this. Now, I tend to be with more the conservative Noahide side, but I've had the opportunity to interact with Rabbi Katz, with Rabbi David Katz, who is the main rabbi with the I Get Ger crowd. And I've had a couple of times when I was able to meet him in person. He came to Chicago twice for conferences, once a year and a half ago and once just a few months ago. And he seems like a very decent human being when you sit down and talk to him. He doesn't seem like the crazed maniac that he comes across on the internet. He seems like a decent human being when you deal with him in a casual environment. And he probably is, except the conflicts occur on the internet. The conflicts occur because religion tends to, many wars are fought over religion, and that's just the nature of things that we wind up fighting. So my idea would be, also Rabbi Korfi, the other main rabbi with the I Get Ger crowd. Now, I've never met him. I've never interacted with him except for the social media, which tends to be very conflict oriented. So he lived in Chicago. He grew up in Chicago, which is where I'm at. He moved back in the 60s. He moved for a while out when a college age, and then he came back to Chicago to live for much of his life. So the Jewish community in Chicago has a memory of Chaim Korfi. And they have generally speaking, a fond memory of him. They remember him as part of the community. They remember him as a friend. And they seem to think nicely of him. Like, you mention his name and people, have a fond memory of him. So I have to assume that he's a decent human being also, despite the raving maniac that he may come across on the internet. He, as a human being, according to everything I've heard, is a decent human being in person. So I have to assume that this is the case. Now, why is that we're fighting each other? I think a lot of it has to do, why are people making all this list of arguments against the rabbi in Texas who uses his Hebrew name when he on the social media? That's one of the attacks they give against him. Why is it that this occurs? And we have to, my idea is we have to slow down. We have to treat each other like human beings and cut out the craziness, because all we're going to do is wind up fighting with each other. And that's not going to accomplish anything. And what's another interesting thing is in all this mix of the current fight, this fellow that tends to be kind of on the edges tends to be on the fringe, Asher Mesa, who I've talked to people that know him and say he's a decent human being, which from his internet presence, you'd never guess he's a decent human being. But I've met people that tell me that he's a decent human being. He actually comes off as sane in this conflict. His recent video posts that he's putting up, he seems relatively sane when you mix it in with all the other craziness that's going on. He seems to be actually part of the table, which probably should make us all think as to how we're behaving with each other, that winds up being the case, that he's now actually a voice in all this. So my main thing is we all need to quiet down. We all need to calm down, stop throwing rocks at each other, and start behaving like mentions. And somebody has to start the ball rolling. So one of the camps has to start the ball rolling of saying, let's treat the other guy who's been if the guy's been throwing rocks at oneself, it's difficult not to throw rocks back. What I'm saying is we have to take a stand for ourselves. Each person has to take a stand for himself, not to throw rocks back. And the person that's still throwing rocks will just be discarded as the lunatic, whoever that person winds up being. But we have to take care of our own behavior.